Hey everybody, this is Amy Wells, Titans Amy from the Tennessee Titans.
This is Nate Bain, Titans social media manager.
Hey everybody, it's Rhett Bryan, game day host of Titans Radio, and you're listening to the Titans of the Southwest podcast with Lito and Big Mo.
And welcome to another episode of the Titans of the Southwest podcast. A big-time guest with us tonight, joining Lito and myself. We have Mr. Jim Wyatt from Titans Online. Jim, thank you for joining us, man.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, we're happy to have you, man. Thank you for dedicating some time to hop on the podcast and talk Titans with us. Lito?
Yeah, it's a great honor to have you on. I know we talked about it earlier, but I think everyone should really know that we've really targeted you there, Mr. Wyatt, from the very beginning. You're one that we really wanted to have on because you've had an impact on both of our kind of outlook, our sports life, really, just because the way you've covered the team that we both love. You've always done it with integrity. You've always been, one of the first people out there, and I know we'll touch on it later, but it's been really, really impactful, and I'm not entirely sure we would actually have Titans of the Southwest if it wasn't for Jim Wyatt. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, truly.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate those kind of words too. It means a lot to me.
So basically, to start off, Jim, I like Lito mentioned, myself, I've been a fan of your work for quite a while now. Can you take us back to the beginning and kind of explain to us how your journey got started?
Yeah, really. I feel very fortunate to be in the position I'm in, because I'll tell you, finishing school and kind of starting out on my professional career. I've started off about the bottom of the barrel, working at Tennessean at night when I got out of college. I had a full-time job working at a place called the Register of Deeds. It was a summer job that I had where property deeds and mortgages and tax liens and a lot of legal stuff is recorded. And I did that, during when I was in school. And then when I got out, I started doing that, and I started working part-time at the Tennessean. I was answering phones, taking high school games, taking bowling scores, taking just about anything you can imagine. Working at night, I'd work a full-time job from 8 to 4:25, and then I'd get down to the paper and work from 5 to 11 a lot of nights, really just answering phone, kind of doing the agate stuff. And got a chance after doing that for a while to go out and cover an event called the Tennessean Regatta. It's the first event I covered for the paper. It was a boat race, or a yacht, really, a sailboat race. Out of Old Hickory Lake. It was nobody wanted to cover the thing, and they said, "Hey, you want to go out and cover this event?" It was about, it was April. It was probably about 35, 40 degrees, and I'm sitting out here watching these sailboats, and I got a byline in the paper, and then it gave me a chance to do a couple other things here and there. I covered a lot of high school games. I covered, electronic football tournaments. I covered, you can't imagine some of the stuff I covered along the way. But the more I got involved, the more I liked it. I worked full-time job and then a part-time job at night, working probably 65, 70 hours a week for about 6 years before I got an opportunity to work full-time at the Tennessean. I had some other opportunities to do it before. The timing just wasn't right. Pay wasn't right. It just wasn't meant to be at that time. But I finally made the leap, covered high school sports. I was a high school coordinator for a couple of years, and then the Titans moved to town, and never dreamed that I would be covering the National Football League team in my hometown. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. My father's a criminal court judge in town. I'm one of 5, and I watched the stadium come up as I used to walk across that bridge downtown when I was working at that full-time job. And my sports editor at the time said, "Hey, how'd you like to cover the Titans and the Predators?" And this was in the summer of '99.
Wow.
I said, "So you got to be kidding me! I just covered the Clinic Bowl, which is the full state tournaments, 1 year, and then the next year I'm covering the National Football League and going to the Super Bowl." My dad always kidded me about going from the Clinic Bowl to the Super Bowl, but so that was how I kind of got my break. And I learned from guys like Jeff Legwold and Paul Kuharski, who kind of showed me the ropes. I didn't know anything about covering the league back then. They explained to me the rules of the salary cap. They explained to me, the kind of etiquette and how you approach these players. It's a lot different than covering high school kids. And so I took their advice, and really I just kind of learned along the way. And I covered the Titans and Predators for a couple of years, and then I started covering them for the paper in 2001 as a full-time beat guy, and did that for all the way till I left to go to the Titans Online in 2015. And it's crazy that we're going into the 20th season. I'm going into my 20th season covering the Titans. It's hard to believe, but it's been a great ride, and I'm very fortunate to be in the position I'm in. Because again, I didn't dream that we'd have an NFL team in Nashville, and I sure didn't dream that I'd be covering the team. But that's where we are today.
Wow. From the Clinic Bowl to the Super Bowl, that's something that's going to stick with me for a while. Wow.
Yeah, that's a big jump.
Yeah, it's a huge jump. So all in all, you spent 14 years as an official reporter, like you said, from 2001 to 2015. But you were with the Tennessean beforehand, so you spent about a quarter century with the Tennessean?
That's right, yeah. I started working at the Tennessean in February of 1990, and which I'm kind of showing my age now. That's when I got out of college. And I worked, full-time job, part-time job from 90 to 97, and that's when I started working at the paper full-time in 97, covering high school sports. Did that for a couple of years, and then started covering the Titans in 99. Worked with a lot of great people, learned a lot from the people I worked with at the Tennessean, and again, it's when I look back, think of all the teams and all the players, all the things I've been able to do. I feel very fortunate, and I want to keep on going, keep doing as long as I can. I do realize I'm forced to be in the position I'm in.
Well, we're gonna keep reading. I mean, I know during your time in the Tennessean, you racked up some awards there for your work. A couple of times you were named one of the top 10 beat writers in the country, and then also you were named, 5 or 6 times one of the state's top sports writers. So all your hard work, it wasn't in vain. You really put a lot of work into it. And what's crazy to me, I think, Jim, is that you sound like you were just as dedicated covering the high school games as you were the NFL games. Did you elevate your game a little bit, or your preparation a little bit?
Yeah, I had to, but I will say this: all those days covering high school sports helped prepare me for covering, the NFL. Over 100 high schools in the Middle Tennessee area. You've got to build sources. You've got to get to know the coaches. You've got to get to know the athletic directors. You've got to be able to work long hours. That's where I stood on the sidelines in the pouring rain, covered high school games, trying to take notes, holding a clear bag over my notebook to keep my penny from messing up where I wouldn't be able to read, my down and distances. I mean, spent a lot of time in, press boxes that were poorly lit, and trying to write from my car and send stories over the phone lines in the middle of nowhere. And, so it's I remember those days, but I remember with great memories, because it helped me develop a work ethic. When I was covering preps, and I did like covering. I love covering high school sports, and I covered football, covered basketball, baseball, wrestling. I mean, you name it. And there was a time when I was doing it when I thought I didn't want to do anything else, because the excitement of the kids, just the pure joy that they would get from winning. And then it's been neat to see some of those guys that I covered kind of blossom, and some of them went to college and were stars. Some of them went to the National Football League and the NBA and were stars. And and I see some of those guys now, and it's just a natural connection that you have. And then I've worked with a lot of great coaches. I love covering high school sports. It wasn't like I was chomping at the bit to do something else. I just got fortunate. I had an editor and some people that believed in me and gave me a shot. I didn't want to let anybody down. I didn't want to embarrass myself. And that's kind of what has driven me, since I started my career, is to do as good a job as I possibly can, and not to embarrass myself.
Well, one thing, Jim, I always admired about you is your style and your approach. I feel it's always so genuine and so respectful, and somehow you manage to find a way to ask the tough questions without coming off, harsh. Is that a skill you had to develop, or is that just your natural personality when interacting with people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I probably learned from my dad, and just how he treats people, and how he has a much tougher job than I do covering sports. I mean, he was a criminal court judge for over 30 years in Nashville, where he had to deal with terrible cases, from murder trials to rape cases, to dealing with some people and having to make some tough decisions on sentencing, and where families are affected. But always did it with a lot of compassion and trying to be fair to people. And I think just watching him kind of helped me, handle my job the same way. I mean, I always try to be fair to people. My job's so much different now. My job working for the team is a heck of a lot different. I had to ask a lot tougher questions. Then at the newspaper, I had to dig, I had to fight, scratch and claw to everything to get anything, and that's what you should do as a beat guy. But you also had to treat people. You had to be fair to people. You couldn't. There are a lot of people in this business who trying to make a splash. Whether you're trying to get clicks for a story, or you're trying to make a name for yourself because hey, I'm a tough guy, I'm going to challenge this guy and try to embarrass him. I never wanted to approach my job like that. You can't burn bridges. You got to be fair to people. You got to be honest people to get them to trust you. And it's not about trying to step in and make a splash, because if you're working with people, day after day after day, you've got to get them to trust you. And I always tried to treat people fairly. That's kind of the way my dad taught me to be.
With reporters, it seems like a lot of people kind of, you either try to be right or you try to be first, breaking the news, or you try to get the more correct information. And one thing I've always admired about you personally, and I'm sure Mo can kind of echo the sentiment here, is you've been towards the top of the heap on both of those categories. You've always been either the first or the most correct one. And I know breaking news for you is a big point of pride for you. We hear that a lot in your voice and the way you tell stories, and it's the way it should be. But you've always been correct with your information too. Do you think there's kind of a weight? Which one outweighs the other, do you think, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, you definitely got to be right. I mean, that's the most important thing. You can't, put misinformation out there. People are just not going to trust you. And that's one thing. You want to be first, obviously, in anything. But if you're first and you're off base on something, then it's hard to reel it back in. I mean, people will remember. So, I took a lot of pride in being first on breaking a story. I mean, that was what I was all about when I was at Tennessean. And again, it's different now that I'm working for the team. But when I was working at the Tennessean, and I think that's the way, I'm an old school beat guy, and that's the most important thing about your job. Yeah, you want to tell good stories, you want to write great game stories, but you gotta own the beat. And if I'm covering the Tennessee Titans and living in Nashville, Tennessee, and my mindset that every story should be mine. I don't care if it's a coach hired, a coach getting hired, a coach getting fired, a player getting signed, a player getting cut, whether a guy's got an ACL injury, an MCL injury, whether who's coming in on a pre-draft visit or a free agency visit, who's getting cut, whether the roster's trimmed of 90 to 75 and from 75 to 53. Who got in trouble overnight. I mean, all of that is supposed to be yours. I didn't get every story when I was covering the Titans for the Tennessean, but I was sure as hell trying. I can tell you that. And if I didn't get a story, I'd lose sleep over it, and it would ruin a big story. It would bother me for weeks. If I got beat on a story, the next thing I try to do is to advance the story. If I got beat on a story about a free agent signing with the Titans, my next job was to talk to the guy, be the first one to talk to him, find out how much the contract is worth. I don't care if it took going to the airport to find them. I mean,
Oh, man.
and again, that's the way it should be. It's not like that everywhere, but that's the way I grew up, because that's the way the people I worked with at the Tennessean, they expected that out of me. I think the readers expected me to get the story. And again, if I didn't get it, I was embarrassed. I felt like I let the people down that work at the Tennessean. So that was kind of the way I grew up, and that's always my mindset. Drives me crazy now. I mean, I couldn't be in a job where I'm retweeting the national guys on my beat, or writing what somebody, at ESPN or NFL Network or another competitor, continuously having to credit them for a story. That's not how I was built. I wouldn't want to do the job if I had to do it. I couldn't look myself in the mirror. I tried to be first. I tried to be right. And, again, I didn't get everything when I was covering the Titans for the Tennessee, but I got my fair share of stories, and I was trying on every one of them.
Yeah, you got more than you didn't get, that's for sure. And so, and I think that's interesting, because that's why people can kind of take your word as law, because you do the digging, and if it's coming from you, then like 99.999% chance that it is true and accurate. And you're in like the perfect position now, because things come down from, Amy Adams Strunk or J Rob, or however the whole system goes through, where you get it first and you get it straight from the horse's mouth. And whenever they say it's okay to leak out or write a story about it or put it out, it seems like the organization has kind of changed, where I don't know if typically beat writers and national media people can really break a whole lot of news on the Titans organization. It seems like we're breaking a lot of our own news, and that's really, really nice. And I think they picked the perfect person for that in yourself, because you've always had that higher standard.
Yeah, and that is the way it has kind of played out. I mean, and my job is now, we put the news out now whenever. I usually write a story. I work with Robbie Bourne, who's the team's media relations director. We talk. Certainly I get insight on when something's coming down the pike, whether it's a coaching hire, or news of a release of a player being released, players getting signed in free agency. So we kind of work together, along with obviously John Robinson, Amy Adams Strunk, the chief decision makers. And when the time is right to go with something, we go with it. I mean, sometimes it's, especially lead up to free agency, the team obviously errs on the side of caution as far as when you put news out. You don't ever want to have a situation happen like what happened in Indianapolis, where you announce a coach is and he's not hired. So a lot of times the team will sometimes news will get out there from the Adam Schefters, the Ian Rappaports, that this has happened, and the team has to wait a little bit before it can release news. But I will say this, a lot of times, and I'd say most of the time in today's media market, the news is coming from the team. I mean, I'm looking at my list now of free agents and guys that have been released. I think the majority of them, the first news came from the team. And when Mike Vrabel was hired, that came from the team. When Mike Belarkey, the team parted ways with him, that came out there from the team. When DeMarco Murray was released, that was first out there from the team. The big stories, a lot of them have come from the team first. That's not the way it's necessarily supposed to be. A lot of those stories can still be had by people, but people haven't been getting them.
So to touch on that a little bit, Jim, I know you kind of have been a little bit back and forth with it. What is the biggest difference from working actually for the team compared to working to the Tennessean? Like, do you have to have a more reserved, patient approach, like when you get your hands on a story, just to wait for approvals, or how does that work?
Well, at the Tennessean, I'm fighting, scratching, clawing for anything. Yeah, and I'm calling agents, and I'm calling team sources, and I'm hanging out at the airport, and I'm calling. I'm not even gonna reveal some of the ways I got stories, but I don't want to tip anybody off on ways they could try. But you're doing everything you possibly can to get to a story, and when you felt good about it, when you get multiple sources telling you this, or you got a source that's spot on, then I would go with it. I'd have to talk to editors. Hey, this is my source. This is what I'm going with. They say go. And so you're fighting and clawing for all those when you're working at a newspaper. With the team, it's more obviously I'm in the loop on news that happens, and when I hear something's coming down the pike, then I'm given a heads up. I prepare a story, and once it's go time, then I will have the story written, send it to Gary Glenn, who I work with in digital media. He publishes out the story, send a link to Robbie Bourne, who I mentioned earlier. Nate Bain, the team's social media guy, tweets it out. I tweet it out. And then the news is out there, but it's kind of working more with a team and going about it that way. When I was with the paper, I'm working under a different set of rules. I mean, I'm paper. I have limitations on. I'm not just going rogue and tweeting out stories that this is happening, this is happening. There's communication there. When I'm at the paper, in those days, you're fighting, scratching, clawing to get it, and then you're busting your butt to get it out there before anybody else does.
Wow, that's crazy, because that's kind of what I was going to ask you about next, is your overall process. The massive amount of content that you produce on a weekly basis is staggering to me. Can you kind of explain your process and how you manage to pump out so much quality content at such a high frequency? You have some of the stories like halfway prepared, or how does that work?
Well, I do. I keep list and list and list. People kind of make fun of me because I keep notebooks. I've got so many notes jotted down. I'm kind of try to be an ideas guy, and I'll have I'll have story ideas, and whenever I go to certain events, whether it's the Super Bowl or the Combine or the Senior Bowl owners meeting, a lot of times I'll try to just accumulate. I'm trying to do as many stories as I can from those places, but at the same time, I'm also gathering where I can have some stuff in the pot. That's the newspaper mindset that I had, and that's another thing we were talking about my high school sports background earlier. I mean, when you're covering high school sports, you've got to have your hands in a lot of different things to, where you can always be prepared to write, and you don't ever want to go without having content. So I just think that background has kind of put a work ethic in me, or I'm always trying to think of story ideas. I'm always trying to have something ready. I'm always trying to, to pump out as much as I can on Titans Online. And, sometimes I'll have stuff ready and we'll freshen it up whenever the time is right. Other stories, I just have got stuff stored in my tape recorder, and whenever the timing's right, I'll go with it. There's so much breaking news these days that, you just, it never seems like things dry up where you don't have something to write. It's a lot easier during the season just because there's always something going on. During the off season, you have to get a little bit more creative, but I do. I try to have the old slogan, the paper was every day matters. I've tried to carry that with me to Titans Online and try to have at least one thing a day there, if not multiple things. I think we had 3 posts a day, 3 posts yesterday. I try to just flood people with information.
Well, I know we appreciate that. We just love to read about the team, and especially if it's good quality content. Like, something that I've noticed about your stuff is it's never stale, and it never appears redundant. Like, even if it's a similar story, like a free agent signing or whatever, you always somehow manage to put a fresh take on it. Lito, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very obvious to me as well. It's not just a copy and paste or a quick little excerpt about the player or something like that just so you can be first. It's not just like, oh, this is their stats and I had this paragraph out there first. It seems like you typically always have a good understanding of players, of the changes that happen, and of the story that you're actually writing on. So whenever you read it, it's not only quick, but it's informative, and that's something that is usually, yeah, exactly. It's something that's usually you have to trade off one or the other. There might be a blog or an article or something out there that's first, but you actually look at it and there's no actual meat on the bone. It's just like, oh, we signed this person whose height is this and whose weight is this and who did this 40. But like your articles seem to have a more of, this is who they are, this is where they were, this is like how they'll impact us. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, that's what I'm actually wanting. So it's interesting to see that you have all of this this ammo kind of stored up in case something like that happens. You can get it out there quick, and that's smart. It's really, really smart.
Yeah, and that's one way, being at the with the team now, it helps because I will get heads up on, hey, this guy could be signed today, or I think we're agreeing to terms with this guy. I've got some advanced knowledge where I can prepare things and add a little bit more, meat to the bone instead of just doing something on the fly. And I think that helps. I mean, I'm able, sometimes stuff happens quickly. Sometimes I'll get a call and say, hey, we're signing this guy, get something ready quickly, and it's a 10-minute turn. But other times, get a big enough heads up. We're getting stuff prepared hours in advance, sometimes a day in advance, and that's why John Robinson's been great from that standpoint. Amy Adams Strump's been great from that standpoint. I mentioned Robbie Bourne again. He's done a good job at keeping the digital team in the loop, and we kind of all work together, and so that helps when you're doing a story. It helps a guy like Gary Glenn, who's trying to add a photo gallery to a story. It helps the other people in the digital department who are adding videos to the story, and it just kind of is a pretty well oiled machine. I'm just a part of it, and there are a lot of people that have their hands on stuff when it goes out. I mentioned Nate earlier. I mean, Nate is involved from a social standpoint. He's working under Robbie Bourne, who's driving the train and getting the release out. And then my job is to get the stories out. When news breaks, that's how it happens. Other times during the course of the week, I'm just doing my own thing and try to, whether it's during the season, certainly I try to have certain things pegged for each day. And I kind of know what I'm doing each day. Obviously, when there's breaking news, that changes things. I kind of have more of a plan you can work off of during the season.
Yeah, there's got to be a method to the madness, I guess, and it helps when you have a plan in place.
One thing I always say at work is it's much easier to stay prepared than it is to get prepared, and it seems like you just constantly stay prepared. So that's good.
Well, some people say I'm kind of consumed with my job. I've always been like that. I was like that was with the paper, but it's different now. I mean, I keep going back to what my job was like at the paper to what my job's like at Titans Online, and obviously, I sleep with my phone next to my bed every night at both jobs. More so when I was with the paper because you never know what's happening in the middle of the night. You got to jump up, especially in the days of Pac-Man Jones, but you got to always kind of be prepared, and I'm fortunate to be in the job that I'm in, and I know I take a lot of pride in trying to do as good a job as I possibly can to deliver as much news as I can, to Titans fans who are in New Mexico or California or Alaska. I mean, all I do is open up my emails each week when I do my mailbag and see where these questions are coming from. I know that fans out there more than just in Nashville, Tennessee. I mean, they're all over the country. Try to do as good a job as I possibly can to give those people as much information as they can. I'm fortunate again to have the job I have. I love the job I have, and so that's what kind of drives me is to just try to deliver.
Definitely. I know we don't want to take up too much of your time, Jim. So now, if we can, we just wanted to ask you some questions about the current state of the team. They made a handful of moves in free agency in all three different waves. Do you see any positions starting to pop up in terms of who we're going to maybe focus on drafting, or what position groups we could focus on drafting?
Well, I mean, I think that's the one thing, the beauty of what John Robinson's done is he has there's been a lot of spots you could look at thinking that, at the start of free agency, hey, the team needs this, the team needs that. Well, a lot of those spots have been filled.
Yep.
Interior line, you've got Kevin Pamphile from the Buccaneers, and Xavier Su'a-Filo from the Texans. Quentin Spain re-signs his tender. All of a sudden, you've got some competition in the middle. The team has signed Will Compton, who was a starting caliber player to fill a void that Avery Williamson left. You've got Benny Logan, formerly of the Chiefs, to step in and fill the spot that Sylvester Williams had. He's going to compete with Austin Johnson. You've got the backup quarterback in Blaine Gabbert to take Matt Castle's place. Malcolm Butler gives you depth at cornerback. Deion Lewis is that other back to go with Derrick Henry. I mean, it's a long list. Michael Campanaro kind of fills the spot where he can help out on special teams and compete at receiver. So I look at needs now, and they're not as glaring. Now, team still needs a third safety. Team still needs depth at inside backer. Team needs an edge rusher, I think. I can still see more numbers being added at receiver, but I think the way that things fall leading up to the draft is John Robinson could go anywhere early, and it wouldn't surprise me.
Wow.
Yeah, he puts himself in a position where there's no obvious choice. Like he's not pigeonholed into one thing. Like we don't have our backs against the wall. Like, okay, well, we have to get this now, because that's how we ended up with like a Jake Locker. And I like Jake Locker, don't get me wrong, but like that general manager decided like we have to get a quarterback, and he kind of puts us in a position where we don't have to do anything. We could go best player available, or if he has his eye on someone in particular or positioned in particular, he can definitely target that in the draft. And Mo and I were talking, anything could happen. There could be a run on quarterbacks early that pushes top end rushers down the line, or there could be a run on defensive line or pass rushers early on, which pushes other positions down towards us. He puts us in a really good position, so our backs aren't against the wall and we could go really anywhere. So that's refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a really good job of building the roster, building depth at a lot of positions. And he's signed some contracts. He had some guys sign contracts that doesn't handcuff the team in off season. So I think a lot of people ask me about the potential for a trade in this year's draft and moving up to get a guy if you like. And it's a little bit tougher, with just 6 picks.
Yeah.
But with John Robinson, I guess you never know.
Yeah, I think I would. If I had to predict, I would say if there is going to be a trade, he's more likely going to trade down than to trade up, because he values those picks, and we only have 6 this time. So I would be more surprised with a trade up than I would with the trade down. I'll say it like that.
Well, the crazy thing about that too that I would add is he could do both. He could trade back to acquire more picks and then trade back up. Like kind of something how he did with Jack Conklin.
Yeah.
I mean, he got the guy he wants, and I think in the 2 drafts that we've had Robinson, he's proven in the first round he's going to get who he wants. Whether he has to wheel and deal to get in the position he needs to get, he's going to do it. He's not afraid to.
Yeah, for sure. But it seems like with Miss Strunk, she's really given J-Rob that freedom to just, hey, do whatever you need to. She doesn't really step in and get in the way, and that kind of bridges, and we'll get back to the player personnel, but this is a question that I'm really interested to hear your perspective on, because you've been there from this whole thing. What are the differences you see between Amy Adams-Strunk and Bud Adams? Not better, not worse, just differences. What are like the major differences you see between them?
Well, I'll say, Mr. Adams, when he was owner of the team here during the latter years, obviously was not quite as active and as involved as she has been during her time as controlling owner. Bud Adams, owner of the Houston Oilers, was a different guy than probably Bud Adams is owner of the Tennessee Titans. In the later years, he still made some tough decisions, but I think he let his people in Nashville kind of run the show because he wasn't here every day. Amy Adams-Strunk is very involved, and while she does let her people make decisions like John Robinson, just a lot of faith in him and a lot of trust that he's going to make the right call. She's making a decision to hire him, to part ways with Rusty Webster, to part ways with Mike Malarkey, and hire Mike Vrabel. Obviously moving from Ken Wisenhunt. She's made so many changes inside the building, from the locker room to the weight room to changes at the stadium. She's obviously was behind the uniform change. She's been very involved at these owners' meetings, been very active in the Nashville community. She's a woman of the people. You see her at games, you see her at functions. She's a lot more out there than Mr. Adams was. And again, he was things were different for him maybe when he was in Houston, but as far as in Nashville, she's gone above and beyond in being visible, not only in the community but being visible around the team and making some tough decisions and wanting to be involved.
I see that. I agree with that. Like all of that stuff. To be honest with you, I was just kind of curious, like if there was anything like that you saw in particular. That's good to know. It's not just my bias showing that like she is more visible, she's more active, she's more hands-on with a lot of the stuff, and she doesn't seem, and I'm not trying to say Mr. Adams was like this, but she doesn't seem like she wants the spotlight on her a whole lot. She just wants the organization to flourish, and she has such a love and such a passion for it. So it's good to kind of have that reinforced. So that was my big thing there.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's spot on there. I mean, that's what she's all about. I mean, yeah, her job and being involved, you kind of got to put yourself out there a little bit. I know she's spoken up before about maybe why she wasn't as involved at the very beginning, and because some people question when she kind of took over for Tommy Smith as a controlling owner, why haven't we seen her more? Why isn't she getting out doing more? And she said herself, I mean, she wanted to get some things established. She wanted to kind of sit back and observe. And once she got to a point where she was comfortable, she started making changes. And then now she's out there. She's out there a lot. And it means a lot to her. I think Nashville means a lot to her. I'm always impressed with her just when she comes in the building and she knows everybody by their name. I mean, she spends some time in Nashville, spends a lot of time in Nashville, but she's got a great recall on the people that work for her. She's got a great recall on people who cover the team. I mean, other writers, I know that she knows them on a first name basis. So she wants to be involved, but she also wants to bring success to this town and this, and the state of Tennessee. And, it means a lot to her.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I listened to that episode on the OTP that you have with Mike Keith and Amy Wells. Everybody go listen to that podcast. It's fantastic. You guys had Miss Amy Adams Strunk on there previously, and I have to admit I was one of the people that was like, well, where is she? Like, who is she? Like, why isn't she more visible? And now just seeing how she's doing it now just kind of reminds me of that old Abraham Lincoln quote, I think. And he's like, if you give me 8 hours to cut down a tree, I'll spend the first 7 sharpening the axe. Like, she just kind of sat back and just getting ready and learning everything and how everything goes and who does what. And then now she's attacking it, and like, she hasn't made a single misstep in my mind. So I absolutely love it. And I was wrong before. I'm not afraid to admit that. I was definitely wrong before. I'm completely happy with the way things are going now, and I'm just gonna sit down, shut up, and enjoy.
In your mind, knowing what you know now, I know we kind of talked about that there's no real glaring holes left on the roster. Would you anticipate this draft class to be more defense heavy, offense heavy, or do you anticipate a balanced draft class?
I think it'll be, with 6 picks, and again, I think it's a good point that potentially you could trade back and get more. I think with 6, it wouldn't shock me if it was a defensive draft and it's maybe more 4-2, maybe 6 picks stay the same, but and it wouldn't surprise me if certain positions are attacked more than once. Just because you take an edge rusher early doesn't mean you don't take an edge rusher again at some point. So
yeah,
and I think that could, not just at that position, but other positions could be attacked multiple times. And so 3-3, 4-2. If it leans one way, and I got to pick. If it goes 4 one side, my hunch is defense. But John Robinson may be looking at things differently, and the draft may fall different than what he expects. That's the one thing you just so unpredictable. You never know what team's going to do ahead of you. You're going to miss out on some guys. Maybe you start taking best player on the board at that time, and maybe it's a different guy than you maybe anticipated. The thing that John Robinson, I can bet, is that he has backup plans on backup plans, and if you miss some guys in the draft, he's probably got certain free agents who are out there that, hey, we'll get this guy if we don't get a certain guy in the draft. So free agency, 8 guys have been added since March, I don't think their team's done yet there. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a little bit of a pause and then the draft happens and then kind of see what else is out there.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. I think after the draft, Robinson will definitely see which players are still out there looking to sign some contracts, and he might snag a couple. And the last question I have for you is kind of a funny one. How close were you to joining John Robinson and Vrabel for some karaoke with Florida Georgia Line?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna give you. I wouldn't have been anywhere close. I was watching from upstairs at Acme. That was a fun night. I got there, golly, probably 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on that day, and saw the crowd kind of build and saw the excitement build. It was such a fun night for the team, but also for Nashville. And again, I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and have seen the city change so much. I went to grade school here, high school here, and have seen the skyline change. Have seen the face of the city change. Just not only in downtown Nashville, but East Nashville and Germantown area and Brookwood, Franklin. I mean, the Nations, another area. I mean, you've got places in Nashville that have just come up out of nowhere, and I love it. I mean, the only bad thing about it is the traffic. But when you have a night like that, I mean, if you're from Nashville, you take a lot of pride in the city. Yeah, I love the city of Nashville, and when I see something like that happen, I look around, and I have to admit, I get a little emotional thinking about what a great city that I live in and how much I enjoy, the team that I cover and people embracing that event. So I know I kind of went off on a tangent there on the Florida Georgia Line question, but that was a great night. I sat up in Acme. People at Acme were, on Broadway were nice enough to let me and a couple other people work from their I guess club area, and I was banging out stories about the event, and all of a sudden I looked down, I could see the crowd, I could see the stage. I was listening to Florida Georgia Line. All of a sudden they're announcing John Robinson and Mike Vrabel to come up on the stage. And going on here, I'd just seen them about 30, 45 minutes earlier after the uniform event wrapped up, and here they are dancing and singing and having a cold beer. Each of them had a cold beer in their hand, and I filmed it. It was pretty funny. They wouldn't be interested in a guy like me stepping up on stage. I sure enjoyed watching them, and I saw John the next morning in the office, and was kind of kidding about how much I enjoyed his performance from the night before. He acted like he was just lip syncing, but he looked like he knew the words and was certainly in dance moves as well. He's a big country music fan, so that was part of a really special night for the city and for the team.
Definitely. That was a lot of fun. I remember I streamed that on YouTube. I shut down everything. I told my wife, listen, you can either sit in the living room and watch this with me, or you can go in the other room, but one way or another, I'm watching this on Jersey Unveil. So, and she sat there and she watched, and she was actually okay with it. So it was a really, really fun event that they had going, and it really showed that we could host the NFL draft. I say we because I feel like I'm a part of Nashville for no particular reason other than the Titans. But can't tell you how much of an honor this was just to sit there and talk to you and talk Titans, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah,
thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. And yeah, we'll do it again sometime.
Definitely.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, y'all have a good night.
All right,
you too.
You too. Take care.
Follow us on Twitter at Titans Southwest. And remember to like and subscribe to the podcast, as well as review and share.